The emergency lights painted everything red on the control station. Ambassador Tola's 3 hands moved across the console, trying to keep them steady. It was hard. Everything was falling apart. Outside the windows of Velen Prime Station, he could see the fires burning on the moon below. Another colony lost. Another million souls consumed by the swarm. Ambassador, we're losing the signal from Velen 7. His aide said quietly. The young Velen's voice cracked. They both knew what that meant. Velen 7 had 3 billion people. Had. Past tense now. Tola closed his large eyes for a moment. His species had evolved on gentle moons with light gravity and thin air. They were philosophers, artists, mathematicians. They had built a civilization on peace and knowledge. But peace meant nothing to the Kreth swarm. The insectoid monsters didn't negotiate. They didn't talk. They just consumed everything in their path. Send the message again, Tola said. Broadcast on all frequencies. Someone has to answer. The message was simple. It had to be. They were running out of time. The Velen Republic was dying. They needed help. They needed ships, soldiers, weapons, anything. The galaxy had to respond. The Galactic Council had to send aid, but days passed and the Council debated. The big powers talked and talked. The Kreth were too dangerous, they said. The cost was too high. One by one, every species offered their sympathies, their thoughts and prayers. But no ships, no soldiers, no help. Tola kept broadcasting. What else could he do? The message went out into the void, spinning through space at the speed of light, reaching further and further into the galaxy. It reached species who turned away. It reached empires who closed their ears. It reached 1,000 worlds who all had reasons why they couldn't help. And then it reached Earth. Commander Day was finishing his 3rd cup of coffee when the message came through. He was stationed at Frontier Station Kepler, one of humanity's furthest outposts. It was boring duty most days. Humanity was new to the galaxy. Just 15 years since first contact. Most aliens still thought of humans as primitives from a quarantined death world. Death world. That's what they called Earth. A planet with crushing gravity, a toxic atmosphere that corroded metal, weather systems that could level cities, and animals that had spent millions of years learning to kill each other. The galaxy had marked Earth as too dangerous for contact for thousands of years. When humans developed faster than light travel on their own, the galaxy had been shocked. Day listened to the message 3 times. His translator struggled with some of the words, but the meaning was clear. An entire civilization was being destroyed. They were begging for help. The message was 3 weeks old. He immediately sent it up the chain of command. Within 6 hours, it reached Admiral Rion at Earth Command. The Admiral was a hard man with gray hair and scars from the resource wars. He'd seen what happened when people ignored calls for help. He'd lived through it. The Admiral called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Generals, admirals, civilian leaders, they all gathered in the secure room beneath Geneva. We're not part of their alliance, General Park said. We don't have any treaties with the Velen Republic. We've never even met them. We barely have enough ships to protect our own colonies, Admiral Kim added. If we send a fleet and it gets destroyed, Earth is vulnerable. Admiral Ryun listened to them all. Then he pulled up a holo image. It showed Earth during the resource wars, cities burning, refugee ships fleeing, desperate messages being sent into space begging for help that never came. I remember this, Ryun said quietly. We called for help. We screamed for it, and no one came. 50 million people died while the galaxy looked the other way. The room went silent. I swore I'd never let that happen again, not if I had the power to stop it. The Admiral looked at each person in the room. We vote now. Do we answer the call? The debate lasted 20 minutes. In the end, the vote was unanimous. 7 ships. That's all they could spare. The TCS Indomitable, Valiant, Righteous, Defiant, Resolute, Guardian, and Sentinel. Not an armada, barely a task force, but it was what they had. Lieutenant Jin was working the night shift at communications when he got the order. His hand shook slightly as he typed out the response message. After 3 weeks of silence, after every other species in the galaxy had turned away, humanity was answering. The message was short. Jean thought about making it longer, more official, more diplomatic. But time was everything now. So he kept it simple. Hold on, we're coming. He sent the message and watched it launch into space at faster than light speed. It would reach Velen Prime in 3 days. The fleet would take 2 weeks to get there. Jin hoped it wouldn't be too late. On Velen Prime Station, Ambassador Tola had stopped expecting responses. They'd received dozens of official regrets. Sorry, but no. Thoughts and prayers, good luck. He was preparing the final evacuation protocols. In 2 days, maybe 3, the Kreth would arrive. The Velen Republic would end. Then his console beeped. Incoming message. He almost ignored it. Another rejection. Another species explaining why they couldn't help. But something made him open it. 3 words. Hold on, we're coming. The sender was listed as Earth. Humanity, the Deathworlders. Tola had heard of them, new to the galaxy, primitive. From a planet so hostile that just living there was considered an extreme sport by galactic standards. He checked the database. Humanity had 7 ships in their frontier fleet. 7. The Kreth had dozens of hive ships. Each hive ship was the size of a small moon. It was suicide. These humans were flying to their deaths for people they'd never met. Tola felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't hope exactly. It was something else. Someone had answered. After all the silence, after all the rejection, someone was coming. He broadcast the message to what remained of his people. Humanity is coming, hold on. Just hold on a little longer. In space, the human fleet was already moving. 7 ships accelerating to faster-than-light speeds. Inside each ship, human crews checked their weapons and armor. They'd trained for this. Not for this exact situation, but humans had been training for war since they learned to stand. Upright on their deadly homeworld, Captain. Sung stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the stars stretch into lines as they entered FTL. His crew was ready. They knew the odds. 7 ships against an entire swarm. Most species would call it hopeless. But humans had learned long ago that hope wasn't about good odds. Hope was about showing up even when the odds were terrible. Hope was about answering the call. The fleet raced through the darkness toward a dying civilization. Behind them, Earth held its breath. Ahead of them, the Kreth swarm waited, unknowing and uncaring that something new was coming. Something from a death world. Something that refused to let innocents die without a fight. The call for aid had been sent. And the Deathworlders had answered. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velen system. 7 ships, their hulls still warm from the jump, their reactors humming with power. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Sung watched the tactical display light up with contacts. Sensors show 4 Kreth hive ships in orbit around Velen 3, reported Lieutenant Huan from Tactical. Multiple fighter craft. Ground forces already deployed on the planet's surface. Sung nodded slowly. 4 hive ships. Each one was massive, easily 10 times the size of his largest vessel. The tactical computer was already calculating odds. They weren't good. They were terrible, actually. But Sung had learned a long time ago that computers didn't understand human stubbornness. Open a channel to Velen Prime Station, he ordered. On Velen Prime, Mira was the remaining defense coordinator. Everyone else had evacuated or died. She'd stayed because someone had to guide the final ships out. Someone had to coordinate what little defense remained. When her console showed incoming ships, she felt her heart sink. More Kreth. It had to be. Then her computer identified them. Human vessels. 7 of them. She'd never seen human ships before. They looked wrong. Bulky and primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the Galactic Council. Heavy armor plating. Brutal angles. Ships designed by engineers who expected to be shot at. Velen Prime, this is Captain Sung of the Terran colonial ship Indomitable. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Mira activated her visual pickup. She wanted to see these humans. The image appeared on her screen. Captain Sung looked alien in ways that made her compound eyes hurt. He was short and compact compared to her species, but dense. So dense, his bones should snap under his own weight. His muscles looked like they were designed for far too much gravity. Captain Sung, she managed to say. You're from Earth, the Death World. Yes, ma'am, Sung replied. His voice was calm, professional. We understand you have a Kreth problem. 4 hive ships, Mira said. She transmitted the tactical data, though she felt foolish doing it. These humans had to see how hopeless this was. They've already taken 8 worlds. Velen 3 is the last populated planet. 3 million civilians still on the surface. We've been evacuating, but she stopped. What was the point of explaining? We'll handle it, Captain Sung said simply. Get your people ready for evacuation. We'll secure orbit and provide cover for your transports. Mira's translator must have malfunctioned. I'm sorry, did you say you'll handle it? Captain, there are 4 hive ships. Each one has more firepower than your entire fleet. Yes, ma'am, we saw the numbers. Sung's expression didn't change. We'll handle it. Indomitable out, the channel closed. Mira stared at her screen in confusion. These humans were either insane or they knew something she didn't. She checked their ship specs again. Primitive fusion drives, simple kinetic weapons, basic energy shields. Nothing that should worry the Kreth. She was too tired to argue. If the humans wanted to die heroically, that was their choice. She went back to coordinating the evacuation. On the Indomitable, Captain Sung turned to his crew. All hands battle stations. Condition 1. This is not a drill. Alarms sounded throughout the ship. Crew members ran to their positions. Weapons came online. In the medical bay, Dr. Hai checked her trauma teams. She'd served in the border conflicts. She knew what combat looked like. Her teams were ready. Captain, the other ships are reporting ready, said Lieutenant Juan. Good. Tactical, what's our acceleration to combat range? Juan checked his calculations. At maximum combat thrust, we can reach firing position in 40 minutes. But sir, that's 6 Gs, we'd have to warn the fleet. Send it. All ships, Winchester Protocol. 6G combat burn. Make every shot count. Across the fleet, human crews strapped into their acceleration couches. 6 Gs meant 6 times Earth's already crushing gravity. Most species in the galaxy would be killed by 3 Gs. Humans trained for 9. The ships accelerated. On Velen Prime, Mira's sensors screamed warnings. The human ships were pushing velocities that should liquefy their crews. She pulled up the biological data on humans. 1.2 G homeworld, dense muscle structure. Cardiovascular systems designed for extreme stress. Deathworlders indeed. The Kreth hive ships detected the approaching human fleet. Their collective intelligence analyzed the threat. 7 small ships, primitive technology, negligible. They didn't even bother changing their formation. Why would they? These tiny vessels were barely worth noticing. On the Indomitable, Captain Sung watched the range counter tick down. 40,000 kilometers. 30,000. 20,000. Missile status? He asked. All tubes loaded with kinetic kill vehicles, Juan reported. Tungsten penetrators, relativistic velocity packages. On my mark. Target the lead hive ship. Concentrated fire. All vessels. The human fleet had learned something during their centuries of warfare on Earth. Sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. Kinetic kill missiles were basically just chunks of tungsten accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. No explosives, no complex warheads, just mass and velocity. E equals mc squared taken to its logical conclusion. Range optimal. Firing solution locked. Fire. 7 ships launched their missiles simultaneously. Dozens of tungsten penetrators, each one accelerating to speeds that made them visible only as streaks on sensors. The Kreth hive ship's shields activated automatically. Energy shields designed to deflect particle beams and plasma. But these weren't particle beams. The first penetrator hit the hive ship at 0.4 light speed. At that velocity, matter didn't work the way most species understood it. The tungsten didn't pierce the ship. It didn't penetrate the armor. It simply converted its kinetic energy into an explosion that would have made a fusion bomb jealous. The hive ship split in half. Sections that had been solid metal turned to vapor. The detonation was visible from Velen Prime as a brief, terrible sun blooming in orbit. On Velen Prime Station, every alarm Mira had started screaming. Her sensors tried to process what just happened. One of the hive ships was gone. Simply gone. The energy release was beyond anything her equipment could properly measure. What did they do? She whispered. The other 3 Kreth hive ships reacted. The collective intelligence recognized the threat now. These primitive ships had destroyed one of their own. They launched their fighters. Hundreds of them. Small, fast craft designed to swarm and overwhelm. In the human carrier Valiant, the pilot briefing was quick. Captain Quan looked at his fighter crews. You've seen the numbers. They have us outnumbered 20-1. Anyone want to back out? Lieutenant Tay raised his hand. Quan blinked. Tay never backed down. Yes, sir, I'd like to request we launch now instead of sitting here talking about it. The other pilots laughed. Quan smiled. All right then. All birds, launch. Show them what Deathworld pilots can do. The Terran interceptors launched into space. They were smaller than the Kreth fighters, more heavily armored and faster. Much faster. Tay accelerated at 12 Gs, his compression suit keeping his blood from pooling, his implants keeping his consciousness sharp. The Kreth fighters moved to intercept, their insectoid pilots operating in perfect synchronization. They'd done this 1,000 times. Swarm tactics, overwhelm with numbers, but they'd never fought humans before. Tay's fighter twisted in ways that should have torn it apart, a 15G turn that left the Kreth pilot struggling to follow. His targeting computer locked on and his kinetic cannon spoke. Depleted uranium rounds moving at hypersonic speeds. 3 Kreth fighters simply disintegrated. Splash 3, Tay called out cheerfully. This is almost fun. Across the battle space, human pilots engaged the swarm. Yes, the Kreth had numbers, but the humans had gravity on their side. They'd evolved dodging predators on a planet that wanted them dead. They'd learned to fly machines in Earth's terrible weather, through storms that could tear ships apart. This was just another day of cheating death. On the Indomitable, Captain Sung watched the tactical display. The fighters were holding. The Kreth hive ships were repositioning, realizing they'd underestimated these primitives. Captain, said Juan quietly, they're calling for reinforcements. We're picking up FTL signatures. More hive ships incoming, Sung nodded. He'd expected this. Juan, charged the Kasaba howitzers. We're going to need them. Sir, those are theoretical weapons. We've only tested them twice. Then this will be test number 3. Charge them. In space, the battle raged. Humans who'd evolved on a death world fought insects from beyond the stars. And for the first time in this war, the Kreth swarm had encountered something they didn't understand. Something that fought back. The drop pods hit the atmosphere of Velen 3 like meteors. Inside each pod, a human marine sat strapped in, enduring 15 Gs of deceleration. Lieutenant Yuna checked her squad status on her helmet display. All green. Good. They'd trained for worse. 30 seconds to impact, the pod's computer announced in a calm voice. Hostiles detected at landing zone. Yuna smiled inside her helmet. Of course there were hostiles. The Kreth had landed warrior drones all over the planet. Giant insectoid creatures, each one the size of a human with razor-sharp limbs and acid for blood. The Velens had tried to fight them. It hadn't gone well. Velens were fragile creatures from low-gravity moons. The Kreth warriors were designed for killing, but they'd never fought humans before. The pods hit the ground hard. Yuna's pod door blew outward with explosive bolts. She stepped out into the purple sky of Velen 3. The gravity was only 0.6 Earth normal. It felt like she could fly. Around her, 200 Marines deployed from their pods, weapons ready. Contact front, someone shouted. The Kreth swarm came over the ridge like a black wave. Hundreds of warrior drones, their mandibles clicking, their multiple legs carrying them forward at terrible speed. They'd massacred every Velen unit they'd encountered. They expected the same here, steady, Yuna said calmly. Let them close. Wait for it, the Kreth were 50 meters away, 40, 30, open fire. The sound was incredible. 200 Marines firing simultaneously. Kinetic weapons, chemical propellant, simple bullets moving at supersonic speeds. Old technology. Primitive by galactic standards. But humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of throwing metal at their enemies. The front rank of Kreth simply disintegrated. The second rank climbed over their bodies and met the same fate. The third rank actually reached the human lines. That's when the Kreth learned what it meant to fight Deathworlders up close. A Kreth warrior drone slammed into Yuna's position. Its razor limb struck her chest plate hard enough to dent the armor. Acid sprayed from its mouth, hissing and smoking on her helmet. The creature was strong, designed to tear through Velen defenses like paper. Yuna grabbed the creature's limb and twisted. On Earth, with its crushing gravity, humans had evolved bone density and muscle strength just to walk around. Here in 0.6 G, she was effectively superhuman. The Kreth's limb snapped like a twig. She brought her combat shotgun up and fired point blank. The creature's carapace exploded. Green blood splattered across the ground. Next, she called out. Around her, Marines engaged in close combat. Private Min blocked a Kreth strike with her armored forearm, the impact strong enough to crack the creature's attacking limb, then drove her combat knife through its head. Corporal Sun operated a rotary cannon, a weapon that fired 6,000 rounds per minute, creating a wall of metal that nothing could pass through. Suppressing fire on the left flank, Yuna ordered. Push them back toward the civilian shelter. The battle was brutal and swift. The Kreth warriors were fierce, but they'd evolved to hunt prey that ran away. Humans didn't run. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, as creatures that simply refused to stop. Every human instinct, every bit of their evolution, every lesson learned on their deadly homeworld, all of it came together in this moment. The Kreth broke. For the first time in this war, the warrior drones retreated. In orbit above Velen 3, the space battle had reached critical point. Lieutenant Tay's fighter squadron was down to half strength, but they'd taken out 3 times their number in Kreth fighters. His fuel was low, his ammunition nearly exhausted, but the human pilot was grinning. "Valiant, Actual, this is Ty. I'm Winchester, requesting rearm and refuel." Captain Kwan's voice came back. "Negative, Tay, we've got bigger problems. 3 more hive ships just dropped out of FTL. We need every bird in the air." Tay checked his tactical display. Kwan was right. 3 more massive Kreth vessels had arrived. The humans now faced 6 hive ships total. The odds had gone from terrible to impossible. "Understood, Valiant. We'll make do." On the Indomitable, Captain Sung watched the new arrivals with calculated calm. His ship had taken damage. The Valiant was venting atmosphere from 3 decks. The Resolute had lost main power and was running on backup systems. They'd hurt the Kreth badly, destroyed 1 hive ship and crippled another, but the enemy kept coming. "Kasaba howitzers charged and ready, Captain," reported Lieutenant Huan. Sung nodded. The Kasaba howitzer was technically a nuclear weapon, but it didn't work like traditional nukes. Instead of an explosion, it focused all the energy into a directed plasma jet moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Humans had invented it back in the 20th century, then shelved it as too destructive. Now facing extinction of an alien species, they'd brought it back. "Target the 3 incoming hive ships. Firing solution on my mark." The Kreth vessels were accelerating toward the human fleet, confident in their numbers. Their collective intelligence had analyzed the battle. These humans were dangerous, yes, but they were small in number. Simple mathematics. The swarm would win through attrition. Fire. The Indomitable launched 3 missiles. They looked ordinary on sensors, just standard ordnance. The Kreth hive ships didn't even bother evading. Their shields would handle simple missiles. Then the warheads detonated. Nuclear fire bloomed in space, but instead of expanding spherically, the energy focused into 3 lances of superheated plasma. Each lance was thousands of kilometers long, moving at relativistic speeds. The Kreth shields designed for conventional weapons might as well have been made of paper. The first lance struck a hive ship dead center. The plasma burned through 30 decks in microseconds, flash vaporizing everything it touched. The ship's reactor detonated, adding its own explosion to the destruction. The second and third lances found their marks. 2 more hive ships crippled in an instant, not destroyed outright but torn apart, their collective intelligence screaming in digital agony. On Velen Prime Station, Mira watched her sensors in shock. The humans had just crippled 3 hive ships with 3 shots. She'd been monitoring the battle, unable to look away, watching these Deathworlders fight with a savagery and skill that shouldn't exist. "Who are these people?" she whispered. The answer came from the battle itself. These were humans, creatures from a planet where the atmosphere was poison, where the weather could kill, where animals hunted each other with tooth and claw, where the very ground could open up and swallow cities. They'd evolved intelligence not to contemplate the stars, but to survive, and they'd gotten very, very good at it. On the ground, Lieutenant Yuna led her Marines toward the primary civilian shelter. The Velens inside had been trapped for 2 days, surrounded by Kreth warriors. They'd sent desperate messages. They'd prayed. They'd prepared to die. Now human Marines covered in alien blood and battle damage were clearing the area around their shelter. Yuna personally pulled the shelter door open. Inside, dozens of Velen civilians huddled together. Fragile beings with compound eyes, thin limbs, bodies designed for gentle moons and peaceful lives. They stared at the humans in terror and awe. These armored creatures looked like monsters, like something from a nightmare. Yuna removed her helmet. Her face was streaked with sweat and dirt, but she smiled gently. "We're here to help. Let's get you to safety." A Velen child, no more than a youngling, approached slowly. In the low gravity, Yuna knelt down, making herself less threatening. The child reached out a trembling hand and touched Yuna's armor. "You're from the Death World," the child said in accented standard. Yes, Una replied. We're from Earth, and we came a long way to make sure you're safe. Outside, the battle continued. Corporal Sun was setting up defensive positions, her heavy weapons creating fields of fire that nothing could cross. Private Min was treating a wounded Marine, her medical training taking over. These warriors who'd fought so fiercely were now gentle with the civilians they'd come to save. In orbit, Captain Sung assessed the situation. 3 hive ships destroyed, 3 crippled, but his fleet was damaged too. The Valiant was in bad shape. They'd lost 40% of their fighters. The Guardian had taken a direct hit and was barely operational. Captain, the remaining Kreth ships are regrouping, Juan reported. They're retreating. Sung watched the tactical display. The 3 remaining functional Kreth vessels were breaking orbit, accelerating away from Velen 3. The swarm was running. For the first time in this war, the unstoppable force had been stopped. Let them go, Sung ordered. Our priority is the evacuation. Contact Lieutenant Una. Get those civilians to the transports. Dr. Hai appeared on the bridge, her medical coat stained with blood. Human blood. Captain, I need to report casualties. Sung nodded. Victory always had a price. Go ahead, Doctor. 37 KIA. 62 wounded, 15 critical. Her voice was steady, professional, but Sung could hear the weight in it. 37 good people who'd never go home. Understood. Make sure their families are notified personally. They died heroes. Yes, sir. The evacuation began. Velen civilians, saved by the Deathworlders, were loaded onto transports. Human Marines, exhausted and battered, stood guard. In space, the damaged human fleet held position, making sure no Kreth returned. The galaxy had sent its thoughts and prayers. Humanity had sent its soldiers, and the difference between the two had never. The medical bay of the Indomitable was crowded. Dr. Hai moved between beds, her hands steady despite 3 days without sleep. Human wounded on one side, Velen civilians on the other. She treated them all the same. A broken bone was a broken bone, whether it belonged to a Deathworlder or a being from a gentle moon. Doctor, we've got another critical incoming, a nurse called out. It's Captain Quan from the Valiant. Hai's heart sank. She'd known Quan for 15 years. They'd served together during the border conflicts. She moved quickly to the emergency bay as the stretcher arrived. Quan was unconscious, his body broken. The Valiant had taken a direct hit to the bridge. He'd stayed at his post, buying time for his crew to evacuate. Get me a surgical team, Hai ordered. Now she worked for 6 hours straight. The damage was extensive. Burns, broken ribs, internal bleeding. But Quan was human. Humans were hard to kill. Their bodies had evolved to take punishment and keep functioning. By the time she finished, the sun was rising on Velen 3, visible through the medical bay windows. Quan would live. He'd have scars and a long recovery, but he'd live. Hai stepped out of surgery to find First Officer Nari waiting. The young woman's uniform was torn and stained. She'd been the one to pull Quan from the burning bridge. How is he? Nari asked. Stable. He'll recover. Hai studied Nari. You saved his life. He ordered the bridge evacuated, didn't he? Yes, ma'am. And I ignored that order. Nari's voice was quiet but firm. We don't leave people behind. That's not how humans work. Hai smiled tiredly. No, it's not. Down on Velen 3, the evacuation was nearly complete. Lieutenant Una stood guard at the final transport site. Her armor was dented and scored with acid burns, but she refused to board the ship until every civilian was safe. A Velen elder approached her. He was old by their standards, his compound eyes dim with age. He'd lived through the entire war, watched his civilization crumble. Now he watched these strange beings from a death world protect his people. Why? He asked simply. We are nothing to you. You owe us nothing. Your own people need you. Why come here to die for strangers? Una removed her helmet. Her face was young, but her eyes held the weight of what she'd seen. 37 names. 37 friends who wouldn't go home. Because someone has to, she said. My grandfather told me a story once. During Earth's resource wars, his city was under siege. They called for help. Sent out messages begging for aid. No one came. 50,000 people died while the world watched. He survived, but he never forgot that feeling. That abandonment. She looked at the old Velen. We swore it would never happen again. Not to anyone. Not while we had ships and soldiers to send. The elder reached out with a trembling hand and touched her arm. Thank you, warrior. Your people have saved us. We will never forget. Behind them, the last transport lifted off. Yuna watched it go, then contacted her squad. All personnel, mission complete. We're done here. The response was cheers and exhausted laughter. They'd done it. Against impossible odds. They'd saved 3 million people. On Velen Prime Station, Ambassador Tola stood in the observation deck. The human fleet hung in orbit, damaged but unbroken. 7 ships had faced down a force that had destroyed a dozen worlds. 7 ships had won. His aide approached. Ambassador, the Galactic Council fleet has arrived. Tola felt something hot and bitter rise in his chest. Have they now? How convenient. Through the windows he could see the Council fleet. Dozens of ships from a dozen species. Beautiful vessels, sleek and advanced, arriving now that the battle was over. Now that the danger had passed. Admiral Ryon's fleet had arrived too. The main Terran force bringing supplies and support. But it was those first 7 ships that had mattered. Those 7 ships that had answered the call. Tola received a communication request from the Council fleet. He ignored it. Instead, he opened a channel to the Indomitable. Captain Sung appeared on the screen. He looked exhausted, his uniform dirty, his eyes red from lack of sleep. But he stood straight. Ambassador Tola, Sung said, the evacuation is complete. All Velen civilians have been moved to safe transports. We're ready to begin system defense patrols. Captain Sung. Tola had to pause, had to find the right words. I watched the battle. I saw what your people did. You lost soldiers. Good people. For us. For strangers, yes sir. 37 killed in action. Sung's voice was steady, but Tola could hear the pain beneath. They knew the risks. They came anyway. Why? It was the same question the Elder had asked Yuna. Why risk so much for people you've never met? Sung was quiet for a moment. Behind him on the bridge, Tola could see the human crew working. Tired faces, determined faces, faces that had stared down extinction and refused to blink. Because we remember what it's like to call for help and hear only silence, Sung finally said. We remember what it's like to be alone and afraid while the galaxy looks away. We swore we'd never let that happen to anyone else. Not while we had the power to stop it. Tola felt tears forming in his compound eyes. Your people saved my civilization, Captain. We owe you everything. You owe us nothing, Ambassador, just pass it forward. If someone calls for help someday, if you have the power to answer, then answer. That's all we ask. The channel closed. Tola stood in silence, watching the human ships. These warriors from a death world had taught his ancient civilization something they'd forgotten. Compassion wasn't just about feeling sorry. Compassion was about showing up. About risking everything when someone needed help. In the Indomitable's Memorial Hall, Captain Sung stood before a wall. On it, 37 names. 37 people who'd boarded the ships knowing they might not come back. Private Chen, only 20 years old. Sergeant Park, who'd had a daughter waiting at home. Commander Wei, who'd been 2 months from retirement. Dr. Hai found him there. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him. I ordered them here, Sung said quietly. This is on me. No, Hai said firmly. You gave them a choice. Every person on this fleet volunteered. They knew the mission. They came anyway. She looked at the names. They saved 3 million people, Sung. 3 million souls who get to live because of those 37. That's not nothing. It doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. They stood in silence, honoring the dead. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. On the Valiant, First Officer Nari sat beside Captain Kwan's bed, reading him reports to keep him connected to his ship. On the Guardian, engineers worked around the clock to repair battle damage. In the fighter bays, Lieutenant Tay and the surviving pilots held a quiet memorial for the ones they'd lost. Down on Velen 3, human Marines helped Velen civilians rebuild. Corporal Sun, who'd operated the heavy weapons during the battle, was now helping repair a school. Private Min treated wounded Velens with the same care she'd shown human patients. A young Velen approached Min while she was working. The child held out something small and purple, a flower native to Velen moons. Thank you for saving us, the child said in broken standard. Min accepted the flower gently. She'd just spent 3 days fighting for her life, had watched friends die, had killed more enemy combatants than she could count. Now this child was giving her a flower. You're welcome, little one, Min said softly. That's what we do. On Earth, the families of the fallen receive the news. Official notifications delivered personally by officers in dress uniforms. Each family was told the same thing. Their loved one had died saving an entire civilization. They died as heroes. It didn't make the pain less, but it meant something. In the Velen refugee ships, 3 million people looked back at the human fleet standing guard over their escape. They'd heard the stories about Deathworlders, violent creatures from a brutal world, primitives who knew only war. But they'd seen something different. They'd seen warriors who fought to protect, not to conquer. They'd seen soldiers who wept for their fallen, and then stood up to keep fighting. They'd seen beings from the most hostile world imaginable show more compassion than the so-called civilized galaxy. The Velens would tell their children about this. About the day the Deathworlders answered the call. About the day humanity showed the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized. Not weapons, not technology, not even strength, compassion, courage. The simple human refusal to let innocents suffer when they had the power to help. That was what made them dangerous. That was what made them heroes. The fleet held position guarding the retreat. Behind them, the Galactic Council arrived with apologies and explanations. But the Velens weren't listening to the Council anymore. They were watching the 7 battered human ships, remembering, learning, and grateful. 3 weeks after the Battle of Velen III, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was enormous, a sphere of polished metal floating in space above the Council homeworld. Representatives from 200 species sat in their designated areas, each section adjusted for their specific environmental needs. The human delegation was small. Ambassador Ryun, the Admiral's sister, stood at the podium with only 2 aides. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she had the same steel in her eyes as her brother. She'd prepared for this moment, knew what was coming. The accusation started immediately. The humans acted without council authorization, declared the Thexian representative, his translator making his clicks and whistles into standard. They deployed military forces in council space without permission. This is a violation of the treaties. They used weapons of mass destruction, added the Corvian delegate. Nuclear devices. Such weapons are banned by council law. Ambassador Ryun listened calmly. She'd expected this. The galaxy's powerful species were embarrassed. Humanity, the newcomers, the primitives from a quarantined death world, had accomplished what the entire council had refused to even attempt. "Are you finished?" Ryun asked when the complaint slowed. "The council demands an explanation for your reckless actions," the Thexian continued. "You endangered galactic peace. You could have started a wider war with the Kreth swarm." "We saved 3 million lives," Ryun said simply. "The Velen Republic sent a distress call." We answered. "That's the explanation. You had no authorization," the Corvian delegate insisted. "We didn't need authorization to do what was right." Ryun's voice was steady. "The Velen Republic was dying. They called for help. Every species in this chamber heard that call. Every single one of you. And you all found reasons to look away." The chamber fell silent. "My species is new to the galaxy," Ryun continued. "We've been part of this community for 15 years. We're still learning your laws, your customs, your politics. But there's one thing we learned a long time ago on Earth. When someone calls for help, you answer. You don't debate. You don't calculate cost and benefit. You answer." The Thexian representative began to speak, but another voice cut him off. "The council recognizes Ambassador Tola of the Velen Republic." Tola walked to the center of the chamber. He moved slowly with dignity, his 3 arms gesturing in the formal Velen manner. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the sphere. "I address the council as the senior surviving member of the Velen Republic. Our civilization stood for 8,000 years. We built wonders. We created art and music and philosophy. And in our darkest hour, when the Kreth swarm came to destroy us, we called for help." He turned, his compound eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. "Every species here heard our call." The Thexians expressed sympathy but cited military commitments elsewhere. The Corvians offered to accept refugees, but no military support. The Draxians sent thoughts and prayers, his voice grew harder. The humans sent ships. 7 ships against an armada. They sent soldiers who knew they were flying to their deaths. 37 humans died defending people they had never met, on a world they had never seen, for a species they barely knew existed. Tola pulled out a data pad. "I have here the combat logs from the battle. I've watched them repeatedly. I've seen human pilots push their bodies beyond what should be survivable. I've seen Marines fight hand-to-hand against Kreth warriors. I've seen Captain Sung order nuclear strikes knowing it would make him a pariah in this council. He looked directly at the human delegation, and I've seen humanity show more compassion and courage than this council has displayed in 1,000 years. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species defended their positions, cited laws and treaties, talked about the complexities of galactic politics. Ambassador Ryun let them argue. Then she spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise. The Velen Republic has petitioned to join the Terran Alliance. We have accepted. They are under our protection now. The announcement caused chaos. The Terran Alliance was small, barely 5 worlds beyond Earth itself. But those worlds were fiercely independent, and now they were adding a major galactic civilization to their number. The Council must approve such an alliance, the Thexian protested. No, Ryun said calmly. The Council must approve membership in the Galactic Council. The Terran Alliance is separate. We're offering the Velens protection, trade, cultural exchange. We ask for nothing in return except their friendship. She paused. Unlike some civilizations, we don't see alliances as transactions. We see them as bonds between people who've bled together. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates called humans dangerous, reckless, a threat to the galactic order. Others quietly began to reconsider. These Deathworlders had shown something the galaxy had forgotten. Not just military might, but the will to use it for others. Finally, a vote was called. The motion to grant Earth full council membership. The vote was close. Many species voted no, fearing what humanity represented, but others remembered the lesson of Velen 3. If the council couldn't protect its own members, what was its purpose? The motion passed by a margin of 12 votes. Ambassador Ryun accepted with grace, but her aide, a young diplomat named Kai, couldn't help but smile. Earth was now a full council member. The Deathworlders had a seat at the table. On Earth, Lieutenant Jin watched the broadcast from his new post at Frontier Command. He'd been promoted twice since sending that first message. Hold on. We're coming. 3 words that had changed everything. His console beeped. Incoming distress call. He pulled it up, read the message. Border dispute in the Talon sector. 3 colony worlds at risk. 1 species attacking another over resource rights. It could turn into a war. Jin forwarded the message up the chain. Within an hour, it reached Captain Sung. Sung was still recovering from his injuries. Broken ribs that hadn't fully healed. Burns that would leave scars. He read the message in his hospital bed while Dr. Hai checked his vitals. You're not cleared for duty, Hai said firmly. I know. But Quan is. And the Indomitable is repaired. Sung, you can't save everyone, he looked at her. Maybe not. But we can try. Admiral Ryun, the original one, was already assembling a task force. 12 ships this time. The fleet was growing. More ships, more volunteers. The Battle of Velen 3 had changed something in humanity. They'd found their purpose in the galaxy, not conquerors, not explorers, protectors. The memorial wall at Frontier Station Kepler had 37 new names. Captain Sung visited it one last time before the fleet departed. He touched each name, remembering faces, voices, jokes shared in the mess hall. We're going to answer another call, he said quietly to the wall. More people who need help. I wish you were here to see it. To be part of it, but they were part of it. Every name on that wall, every human who'd given their life for strangers, they'd set an example. They'd shown the galaxy what humanity could be. The fleet departed Earth orbit, 12 ships heading for the Talon sector. More would follow. The word was spreading through the galaxy. If you needed help, if you were in trouble, if you called out into the void, humanity would answer. On Velen 3, recovery was underway. Humans and Velens working side by side to rebuild. Lieutenant Yuna had been reassigned to the diplomatic corps, helping forge the new alliance. She walked through the reconstructed capital city with a group of Velen officials. They passed a monument, new construction, a statue of a human marine in armor, kneeling to offer a hand to a Velen child. The inscription was in both standard and Velen script. They heard our call. Yuna stopped to look at it. One of the Velen officials, the same elder who'd questioned her during the evacuation, stood beside her. Your people changed us, he said quietly. We thought we were civilized. We thought we understood morality and ethics. Then you came, warriors from a death world showing us what true civilization means. We just did what anyone should do, Yuna said. No. The elder touched the statue gently. That's the point. Anyone should, but only you did. Across the galaxy the story spread. The Deathworlders who answered the call. 7 ships against impossible odds. 37 names on a memorial wall. 3 million lives saved. Other species began to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Yes, they came from a brutal world. Yes, they were warriors. But they were warriors with hearts. Soldiers who fought to protect, not to conquer. The Galactic Council would never be the same. For thousands of years it had operated on calculated self-interest. Help others only when beneficial. Avoid risk. Protect your own. Humanity had introduced a new variable, compassion without calculation, the willingness to risk everything for strangers. Some species feared it. Others admired it. But all of them had to acknowledge it. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. On the bridge of the Indomitable, now part of the Talon Sector Task Force, Captain Quan stood at his post. His body still bore the scars from Velen 3, but he was back on duty. First Officer Nari stood beside him, the woman who'd saved his life. Message from the colonies, Nari reported. They're grateful we're coming. They didn't think anyone would answer their call. Quan smiled slightly. They should know better by now. Humanity always answers, yes, sir. What are our orders? Same as always. Protect the innocent.